In this tutorial we're going to talk about migraine with aura. It was previously called classic migraine, classical migraine, and a number of other words, but we replaced it with migraine with aura. And here you see the subdivision of migraine with aura at the third digit level into migraine with typical aura, migraine with brainstem aura, hemiplegic migraine, and retinal migraine. In the next slide we see the diagnostic criteria for migraine with aura. And people should have at least 2 attacks, and it should consist of, and here we mention all the possible symptoms: visual, sensory, speech, or language, motor, brainstem, retinal symptoms. And there should be 3 out of 6 characteristics of the symptoms. 1 aura symptom should, or more, should spread gradually over more than or equal to 5 minutes. 2 symptoms or more should occur in succession, not at the same time. Each individual aura symptom should last 5 to 60 minutes. More than or equal to 1 aura symptom is unilateral, and 1 or more is positive. Positive means tingling, flickering lights, and so on, as opposed to just deficits. And lastly, the aura should be accompanied by, or most often followed by, headache within 60 minutes. 3 out of these 6 are necessary to make the diagnosis, and the 2 most important are the gradual spread and the fact that symptoms can be positive. And this is the most important to distinguish from transient ischemic attacks, which, as you know, last almost the same amount of time, and also as transient, and in other words, could mimic migraine with aura. And this is in fact one of the most important differential diagnoses in the emergency room for young doctors. People who come in, and is it a migraine aura or is it a transient ischemic attack? Should we launch the whole investigational program for vascular disease, or should we not? In a study with Professor Elena Lebedeva from Russia, we have shown that this new set of criteria for migraine with aura is very efficient in distinguishing between these 2 entities, whereas the criteria we had before could not really distinguish migraine aura from transient ischemic attacks. Here we see a typical visual aura starting out in the periphery on the first picture, then moving towards the center of vision in 2, 3, 4, and 5. Most often it actually goes the other way. It starts centrally and moves out to the periphery, but both are possible. Visual disturbances are, of course, homonymous because they are caused by spreading depression in the occipital cortex. I just showed you that the criteria for migraine with aura in general at the 2nd digit level, and now we go to the subform, which is called migraine with typical aura. And the typical thing is that the symptom have to be either visual, sensory, or speech. This is the most prevalent type of migraine with aura. And we actually also distinguish this into 2 subgroups at the 4th digit level: typical aura with headache and typical aura without headache. So aura without headache is quite common in the general population. If they have a headache, which the majority of patients have, it can either be a mild or moderate headache, or it can be full-blown migraine-like headache with nausea and vomiting and so on. So there's not a strict 1-to-1 relationship between the aura and the headache that is probably triggered by the aura. A very rare subform of migraine with aura is migraine with brainstem aura, and it has even been disputed whether it exists or not. But the recent paper made it likely that it does exist as an entity. But at the same time, there are many studies showing that the criteria shown here are too open. So at least when patients are diagnosed by interviewers, there are far too many who fulfill these criteria, and it will appear that migraine with brainstem aura is quite a common type of migraine with aura. And this is in complete contrast to the opinion of experts who see many patients in the headache centers and who rarely see patients who have a convincing brainstem aura. And for that reason, it's been suggested to tighten the criteria. We see that in the next slide. And the text in red is how it's being tightened. This was field tested in my own group, but of course more work needs to be done on this, and it's up to the future classification committee to see whether we would preserve the current diagnostic criteria or move towards the proposed revised criteria. Hemiplegic migraine is a rare subform of migraine with aura, but very, very interesting. And it is distinguished because people have weakness as part of the aura. It can quite often difficult to distinguish sensory disturbances from actual paresis, because patients say that they are weak on one side and doesn't function as it should, but it can be sensory or it can be motor. It's only when it's a real motor weakness that we talk about hemiplegic migraine. And about half of the cases are familial and show a dominant-like inheritance pattern. And in the large families with a dominant inheritance pattern, the responsible genes and mutations have been identified in about 50% of the cases. So we have familial hemiplegic migraine type 1, 2, and 3 with known genetic abnormality. And then we have the ones where there is no known genetic abnormality. To be familial means that there is at least one first or second degree relative who also has hemiplegic migraine. Then we get to a very disputed entity, retinal migraine. And why is it so difficult and at the same time likely that it does exist? We know that it's quite easy to produce a spreading depression in the retina, and there's actually some experimental models in animals, chicks for example, where they study spreading depression in the retina. But good clinical cases with slow spread in the retina are not really available in the literature. And patients who have migraine with aura, they often mix up homonymous visual disturbances with monocular visual disturbances. And that's why these criteria require that there should be the documentation of the monocular nature of the disturbance, either by direct observation during attack, which is of course very difficult and rare, but another possibility by drawing made by the patient after good instructions about what it means to be monocular. Such cases probably do exist. There are few cases described, but much more literature, much more study is needed. Sometimes the migraine aura lasts much longer or even persist for days or weeks, called migraine with persisting aura. And in some cases, this is because the aura has caused an infarct. So here we have the diagnostic criteria for migrainous infarct. It's a typical aura that just where the symptoms that just continue, and there's imaging evidence of an ischemic lesion. In other cases, as I said, there is imaging done but no lesion, and then it's migraine with prolonged aura. So that was a short trip through migraine with aura. It's no doubt that this is the most fascinating type of aura because of its very rich symptomatology, and also because this symptomatology is kind of view into the function of the brain, and lots of studies are now still going on trying to describe in more detail the basic nature of the migraine aura. Thank you.